Hi, folks. Here with Tacitus today. Tacitus today, your pushback channel. Thank you for joining this audio live stream. In this essay, I'd like to talk about affirmative action, and I'll begin with affirmative action in the animal kingdom, which is um, I've mentioned in previous videos that we live right on the adjoining a forest, so like 10 meters off the back deck, the forest begins and it goes for miles in all directions. So we get all sorts of critters and creatures coming along from wallabies, which for overseas audiences like a small kangaroo, and all sorts of bird life and goodness knows what. So lizards and snakes and the whole nine yards. So we get to see a lot of it, and sometimes I especially when I'm working, I might sit out on the deck on a nice day and take the computer out there and do a lot of typing and contemplate the universe and so on. And we're my wife and I are very big on helping native animals, and we've been involved in that for some years now. And we've rescued a gazillion sort of injured native animals and marsupials and so on. And things like the the Australian marsupial tree possums and so on, which are nothing like the opossum that are in you see in the Americas. So anyway, we there's a particular, and so I'm getting onto the affirmative action thing here, but there's a particular sort of parrot that's that was local to the area, but other parrots have come into the area, especially over the last 30-odd years, 35 years. And there have been a number of sort of plantations, wood plantations and so on that have been set up in between the northern tropical rainforests and the subtropical forests of say, around Sydney. And what's happened is the tropical rainforest parrots have migrated or expanded. They haven't migrated, they've just expanded south, and they've ended up coming into the area, this other parrot, and this parrot can't compete. It's got very delicate sort of feet, and is constantly we find injured parrots that are sort of hobbling around. And first off, we took the view that these were just temporary setbacks. Parrot got injured. It seems otherwise healthy, so why don't we try and sort of intercede, if you like, and engage in affirmative action program? Well, we didn't necessarily see it that way at first. So we got researched, and we got special seed and so on that this parrot eats, and we started to look after them. And then more and more of them came, and then they had sort of offspring, and then they came. And before we really knew it and had realized it, and maybe we should have pulled back at a certain point, we were effectively underwriting their existence. Now, coming to the affirmative action side of things, we've watched them quite closely, and we've become sort of I don't know, observers, zoological type observers, but we've looked at in some detail and kind of catalogued it for posterity, but catalogued it for various wildlife groups that have an interest in having some sort of reference source. But we found in competition with just about all the other parrots and all the other birds, this bird just can't, this particular parrot that we're helping just can't compete. Firstly, it's got quite a specialized beak, so it doesn't have a wide variety of things it can eat. The parrots it's competing with have a much higher technology in this sense. They're that they can eat a wide range of different foods, but because they're so successful, they've procreated to an extent where they're crowding out this other bird that again just can't compete. Can't procreate at the rate. It doesn't have the wide enough range of food because of its limited capability beak, and also it's quite delicate and easily gets, its feet are easily injured. I assume squabbling with other parrots. I don't know. Now, on top of that, there's not, they're just not as clever. They just don't have the brain power, if you like, of the other parrots. So organisationally, they're just much less capable of organising themselves in groups That they can kind of manage a family unit while the young, the fledglings are still young, but then that's it. That's as far as it goes. They really can't exist successfully in groups, whereas the other parrots can. So if a bunch of these parrots that we're helping arrive at once, they'll squabble over one pile of seeds. And I've even tried to put multiple piles of seeds out. So one pile of seeds for each of them, but they'll still squabble over the one pile until that's dispersed and blown away in all directions. None of them have got anything to eat. Then they'll squabble over the next pile, leaving all the other piles untouched, by the way. And they'll squabble over each pile until all the seeds are gone. Or they'll squabble over one pile while other parrots, competitor parrots come in, or competitor birds come in and eat all the other ones. So they'll squabble amongst themselves to the death almost, but will just stand by and seem to be unable to comprehend that while you're doing this, all that other food is being lost or eaten by other birds. Can you work that out, that you're actually losing your opportunity? But they're just too dumb, these birds. They're just too stupid. And I think they've developed in genetically and so on, and their evolution has been fairly large territories per bird. So they're hardwired to say, well, if I get rid of the competitor, my own breed of bird, if I can get rid of that competitor, then I'm good to go. And so they're hardwired in that direction rather than adapting to circumstances, which is my next point. The other parrots, and the most successful one in particular, it's able to adapt to circumstances. So a bunch of them will arrive. They'll observe the situation, and then they seem to have within a range. They seem to have an ability to adapt to the situation, and so they'll squabble for 1 or 2 moments, but then they'll work out how much food there is, and they'll make sure that every one of their compatriot parrots, if you like, get something to eat. They'll make sure every parrot gets something to eat. There's no idea of, I'm going to hog it all, you guys can't have any. They don't do that. They've got and it's an organized way of sharing. They'll quickly look, how much food is there? Okay, that's 5 seeds each. And they'll almost make that level of calculation. Now, when other competitor parrots come in, or even bigger birds like brush turkeys and things like that, they'll organise into a swarming group to scare off the other birds, and do this quite successfully, and so they adapt quite quickly, or are able to adapt again within a range, and organise themselves around the circumstances they find. The other parrot, the one that's being that we're helping, is incapable of that. It just can't do it. So they just look they stand by bewildered, and so, well, what do I do now? And they just seem to have no idea. They can't respond. They can't organise. They can't get around the issue, and they stand by quite full on. You can see almost the look on their faces as they stand by watching the food get eaten by the other parrots. I don't know what to do. What do I do? And that type of thing. Which is a little irritating in some ways, but watching it. But these parrots, what we're doing, or what we have done, unwittingly at first, but we're sort of thinking about it now, is that we're engaging in affirmative action. We're helping the least capable and the least able of the parrots, who under natural conditions and circumstances would be pretty much bred out of existence. So, I think they'll be extinct within 100 years, these birds, other than in zoos and things like that. They just cannot compete with the other birds around. They just can't do it, the other parrots. And all the other parrots have a much wider range of food they can eat, and that range of food also includes the food that these parrots, with their specialist beak, eat. So eventually they'll be just crowded out of all their food sources, and they'll be, as I say, they'll be extinct. Now, also, they like any animal, as soon as their circumstances improve, that is the amount of food they have access to. I think maybe it's a body weight thing, but as soon as they achieve a certain body weight, they instantly procreate. So These parrots are the ones that we're helping, even ones that have got like missing feet and all sorts of things from the injuries they've sustained. They still procreate, and so they'll come along with their their fledglings, and but none of them can compare. And so it's got to the point where unless either my wife or I, either we put the seeds out, and then we actually have to stand there and shoo away the other birds or the other parrots, just to make sure these ones get something to eat. Otherwise, they won't. They get shooed away from the scared off from the food instantly, or they engage in this futile squabbling over one pile of food while their opposition eats all the other piles of food. So this is affirmative action. I want to come to something more real life now. In a modern, sophisticated society where high levels of literacy, advanced technical skills, city living, the ability to follow laws and rules, the ability to accept that I'll give up my individual arbitrary freedoms to do what I want in return for rules that everybody lives by, I accept the law on the basis that everyone is treated equally under the law. I accept that instead of a tribal elder, that a judge in a court of law will make a decision on a dispute or something like that, law breaking or whatever the case may be, and that will, because everyone will be treated equally and justly by that, I will accept giving that power, as a citizen, and I will also accept my obligations as a citizen to my fellow citizens and so on. Now, there's not many people in the world, societies in the world, that can live that way. Very few, in fact. And Western society, white Western society, really the only societies in the world that developed that capacity, that was largely voluntary. You can have systems like, say, the communist Soviet Union or communist China, where it's brutally enforced, but where the law is still arbitrary. You have the wrong thoughts, you can be thrown in prison. But if you're a corrupt party official, then you can break numerous laws and nobody cares. So the law is not applied equally, and it's very politicized and ideological and so on. But in Western society, and so there's a very small number of people, in fact, that were, even in today's terms, the societies, well, not so much now, but once lived under that, those systems would have been, 10 to 12% of the world's population. It was always a small, maybe even less than that. It was always a small number of people that could live that way, and using societies like Britain, for example, as a classic example. But as soon as you move to, even today, you look at the countries of Eastern Europe and so on, and Africa and Asia, there's very, very few, very, very few societies that can actually live that way, and that's perceived the benefit of it. Now look at the migrants that are being brought into, and just finishing off on that, those societies were also the richest societies in the world, by far the richest societies. So if you look at the top 10 economies in the world, or per capita, I guess you look in total mass, China's quite big now, but in per capita terms, individual wealth terms, they're all white societies in the top there, and all have pretty much that same structure of the law and courts and voluntary handing over of power to the state and elected representatives and so on. That's changing, and changing fast. The globalists are making sure of that, because you can't have those sort of societies with high social trust and have the globalist project. You can't have the two together. So the globalists are crushing and aggressively crushing social trust, because that's a way of clears the path for them to implement the globalist project. But if you look at the people that are brought into mass migration terms, that are brought into those wealthy white societies, not really any of them are integrating, and the integration rate is very small. Now, you can say that the Chinese and the Indians, they don't commit much crime, and their crime is equivalent or even less in some cases than white crime. But they also create, if you like, ghetto economies, sub-economies within the economy. They're not integrating. And if the amount of Chinese businesses in Australia I go to where they employ none or one white Western, the white Western person being the little blonde chick on the fucking reception desk. Everyone else is Chinese. They talk Chinese amongst themselves. The documents between themselves are all in Chinese, and the Indians are the same. So nobody, these ones aren't. So while they're not coming to the West and creating criminal activity, as in running around the streets murdering folks or something, or breaking shop windows, they're creating sub-societies and sub-economies with effectively their own rules amongst themselves. And doing business only with other Chinese or only with other Indians and so on. So that's in my view equivalent to a criminal gang in effect, in as much as they don't integrate, and the wealth is extracted from the Western society, not circular and within it. And that to me is a, my reckoning is a problem. But coming to the black populations now, they seem totally unable to integrate into Western society. The recent Eritrean riots and so on, and they're unable, to survive without affirmative action. And so all the minorities that are propped up by affirmative action, they're only achieving, or not achieving anything at all. They're only being pushed forward by affirmative action, not because of any form of merit. They're only there because they're being artificially supported. Now, the cost of that artificial support is quite high. And if that affirmative action support was withdrawn tomorrow, that would all collapse like a house of cards. And I came back to these parrots that were looking after the ones that can't compete with the rest of them. The minute our support is withdrawn, they're fucked. And it's something that, from sort of a wider moral perspective, concerns us, that at what point do we stop supporting them? Should we be supporting? Should we have been suckered into it in the first place? And the thought of withdrawing support and then having them suffer from that accordingly. But by not supporting them, we're allowing natural forces to take place, to run through that whole wildlife system, which is maybe what we should have done at the outset. Even again, though we were drawn into it by seeing the injured parrots, but nonetheless, it's still a form of affirmative action, and from creatures that don't have the brain power, the organizational capacity, or the ability to adapt, and that's really what it comes down to. And it's the same for these people that are being brought into the West. The majority of them will never adapt to the Western system, and indeed that's, in my view at least, what the globalists want. The Western system is simply getting in the way of the elected representative, independent courts, rule of law, due legal process. All of that gets in the way of the globalist project, so they want it gone. And what better way to get rid of it is to bring in a whole shitload of people who have no investment and no even ability to do. Even I mean, if you look at it, even black people in the United States that have been in America for 180 years since slavery, and they've been in white societies for 400, 500 years, whatever it's been. They still can't integrate. They still aggressively refusing to integrate, and they want all the handouts and all the benefits of living in a rich society. Want to do none of the things that will, or very few of the things that will deliver those benefits to them out of any sort of merit. But affirmative action adds cost, and it also automatically creates a victim class that otherwise wouldn't exist. For example, with these parrots, there's probably double the amount of parrots now that there were when we started. They may all be there because of the affirmative action, as in giving the food and everything. And the same goes for minority, the populations that are being artificially propped up in the West when they come to, the third world peasants coming to the West. There's probably many more. Do you think these Arabic people from Afghanistan, they're having 10 children and all this sort of thing and getting government benefits for doing so? Would they be doing that without the affirmative action support and so on? Probably not. Would women be staying single and be so keen to divorce in the West if it wasn't for affirmative action? Again, probably not. So that's my view. You've been with Tacitus today at your Pushback channel, and thank you for listening.